Hey, GUOBEN here with a guide on GUOBEN. Despite being the slowest character in the game, Ben packs a punch when it matters with his explosive parries and follow-ups. I am a main DPS Ben enjoyer, but we'll go over his normal usage as a burst sub-DPS support defense thingy. So today we're going to be looking at his abilities, the ones that matter at least, some combos, and then best builds and teams. Like and sub if you enjoyed this one, and let's go begin. Ben is a fire defense agent and our only one of this combo in the game right now. On release he had the highest base defense, but now Seth and Caesar have more, despite being nowhere near as massive as him. His scaling stat is energy regen, and at level 60 he will thus have 1.56 regen a second. For leveling priority I would focus on his specials, then his chain and assist, followed by dodge, with basics being last but not being used too much if using Ben in his normal role. Now, he doesn't have a special bar in the top left or weird gauge that he builds up. He's just Ben, and he's great at doing stuff, so hey, let's check him out. Ben's core passive will convert a chunk of his defense into attack, and to be honest, at level 7, that 80% is quite a large amount. This conversion happens pre-combat, so any combat def buffs won't buff his attack, but it does mean that combat attack buffs multiply this massive base attack he gets, and so he can get pretty dang high. Secondly, from this core passive, if he launches a follow-up attack during his EX special, he will also give all members a def scaling shield for 30 seconds. When considering his energy regen and a normal rotation, you can keep this up all the time. And if Ben has a fellow Bellobog friend on his team, or another fire agent, this shield will be giving 16% crit rate to allies, defense and offense in one. It is around the same strength of a 500 combat attack buff, but isn't as universal. So the core gameplay loop of Ben is parrying, whether that be with a defensive assist or with his EX specials. Just like Caesar, Ben can tank hits from enemies. In fact, he is the OG parry spammer. But not only does he block damage for your allies, he does a ton of damage whilst doing so. Ben's EX when pressed once will make him slam his weapon into the ground and block attacks. He can also hold the EX to remain in a blocking stance. He won't be invulnerable anymore, but he will have a 16% max HP shield to tank hits for a bit. Now, if Ben successfully blocked an attack with the first part of his EX, he will perform a block counter instead of the normal attack, and this has a higher damage multiplier. And finally, if you press EX again after using his EX at all, he performs a follow-up attack. You don't have to block attacks to launch this, but it will change how the second part of the EX acts, as well as its damage. If you don't block an attack, the second EX will perform a weaker, but still strong, forward strike that pushes enemies with you. If you do block an attack, you'll perform a big swinging attack for lots of damage with lots of reach. Weaker enemies will also be carried around by this. So the next time you see a golden flash, instead of parrying away, you can EX twice on Ben for loads of burst damage and daze. He can even do this with his unempowered EX special, but I find defensive assists to be more useful. Also, because of how powerful his EX blocks are, you can interrupt a lot of big enemies' combos. And I want to now look at Ben's basics because he has some basic skip cancels and other useful things. And they are actually not too slow by themselves, but they have some insane hit lag to convey the pure weight of this weapon when hitting enemies. I use basics a bunch on main DPS Ben, but the next combo, as well as its utility, can be useful for the normal sub DPS Ben. So after hitting the second part of your EX, the follow-up, Ben can chain directly into basics 2 and 3, completely skipping basic 1. So for a combo I can parry in with a defensive assist, EX the next incoming attack, EX2, then slam dunk them. It's a combo I like doing a lot as it offers a lot of damage and daze, especially in AoE. But if you have a main DPS, I would prioritize just the defensive assist and EX, and then you can swap cancel during Ben's long follow-up animation. You can also dash attack into basics 2 and 3. I love Ben's basic attacks because of how useful they are for getting tons of smaller enemies all in one pile. Combine that with a massive block counter follow-up and you'll stun the whole squad for your main DPS. Or you can group them up and let the DPS go ham from the start. Another ability I like to talk about is his dodge counter. This thing is so easily spammable because of how quick it is. It does mean you have a smaller time of invulnerability, but it does decent damage and daze whilst providing tons of energy. It's especially nice into the spammy types of enemies like the flamethrowers, but you can keep chaining this into another one. And finally, since Ben is a beefy dude, his defense assists are part of the strongest type of defensive assists. They can resist heavy attacks better than most other agents, whilst also consuming less assist points. Now, since Ben might be M6 already or soon if you're a lighter enjoyer, then his Mindscape review might help you out. M1 provides some pretty cool utility, applying a 30% damage reduction on the enemy that was blocked by his special attack. That can be his EX as usual, but it can even be with his normal special. So with the shield on top, and your DPS is going to be pretty tanky in a 1v1. If successfully triggering a block counter, Ben will gain some damage at M2. 300% of his def will be inflicted, and again on either type of specials, making his normal special attack actually do some damage. M4 is again a buff to his specials. Basically, it will buff his counter's damage percent by 30% if blocking enemy damage with his invulnerability. It already does a ton of damage, and what's better than more? His final one, you guessed it, isn't buffing his specials. Instead, his specials now buff his kit. After attacking with his EX or follow-up during his EX, he'll gain a 20% days increase to basics, dash attacks, and dodge counters. It's a pretty substantial increase and makes them have solid stunning power, especially if you are doing combos instead of swapping back out immediately. For builds, you will opt for Swing Jazz or Proto Punk. Either work just fine, either prioritizing great uptime with Proto Punk, but sacrificing the boost during stuns that Swing Jazz would provide. I also like the energy regen buff to ensure he can EX as much as possible when we swap in on him. For 2 pieces, you could just opt for the opposing set, so 4 swing with 2 proto, or 4 proto with 2 swing. Stuff like 2 Inferno and Soul Rock work for damage over utility. If you want the most damage from Ben, you'd actually run 4 Hormone Punk if you are swapping in at the right time. The combat attack boosting his massive attack stat after the def conversion is crazy for damage. Your main stats can be full def if you really don't care, but I recommend going crit 4th disc and fire damage 5th disc if you want some punch out of him. If running his signature, then I'd opt for crit damage, as it guarantees critical hits on his short bursts anyways. For a stat goal, I'd aim for a 50 to 100 crit ratio, but you can go full on crit damage if using his signature and only performing quick combos. You then want a good amount of attack and defense, and note that this attack includes the def conversion since it's pre-combat. Now Ben's damage scales all on attack barring his M2, but his signature engine and shield scale on defense, and he wants a ton for his def to attack conversion anyway. W engines don't have a base def stat, only a base attack, so attack percent substats are technically stronger for your attack stat overall, but def is close behind and contributes to many other things on top. For weapons, Ben has several paths he can go. If you need the utility, then Caesar Signature or Spring Embrace are all we have utility-wise. You can either give team-wide damage and daze, or some energy generation rate. If you want damage, there's nothing better than Big Cylinder for his explosive burst potential with his counters. Only Bunny Bad comes close due to its def main stat paired with combat attack percent. For dazing power, you'd go for Original Transmorpher for the combat impact, or Caesar's weapon again as its main stat is impact. And now for teams, I'm gonna be real, Ben doesn't see much use. The whole gimmick with Khalida is cool, but you're sacrificing 2 team slots for some cool animations and a bit more power in Khalida's abilities. But she's a stunner, not a DPS. And Caesar seems to just be a limited Ben. Regardless, here's teams where I think he works well. I like him as a sub-DPS Daisy unit in a team like Lucy, Soldier 11, Ben. In fact, that was my main team for a while. If you do want to run him with Khalida, then you go Soldier, Khalida, Ben. You could try and make him work like Caesar can as a universal support shield bot, but it's clear that Caesar's buffs are so much stronger and universal. He can work as a flex slot in Shiyu Disputed Node and also in the new tower mode coming next patch. In these modes, you don't want to die for maximum points, and healing is nearly non-existent, so his shielding and parrying potential can really come in clutch here if you're a newer player. Some enemies have some brutal parry timings or none at all, so having a tanky shield bot may help you get some rewards. If you have teams you enjoy him in, let me know below, and this is my current main DPS team for Ben using a sub-DPS Bernice with Lucy. I think Hyper Ben with the Caesar is probably better, but she's on my other side right now. I will say that Ben main DPS is kinda sus, because a lot of his damage is in those parries and his signature, which cannot happen when the enemy is stunned. But I just think he's neat, and Bernice sub DPS helps when the enemies are down. So like and sub if you enjoyed this video, and let me know below which guide you want next. It is hard for me to go back and do all the characters because I took such a long break and have been busy with HSR, but maybe I'll be able to. Thanks for watching and have a Guoba day.